I should preface this by saying I never really believed in ghost stories before this trip. I'd heard the usual campfire tales, read a few creepy stories online, even laughed at horror movies. But what happened during my sophomore year, on a field trip I was actually looking forward to, is something I've never been able to explain, something that still wakes me up in the middle of the night. Back then, our school offered a lot of outdoor education trips, hiking, kayaking, even rock climbing for those brave enough. I signed up for a trip to Clearbrook State Park, a sprawling wilderness known for its waterfalls. It sounded fun and harmless enough. A day away from the fluorescent-lit classrooms and math quizzes, the bus ride was a couple of hours. Everyone was in that excited, restless mood you only get when you're 16 and free for the day. We piled out of the bus with our backpacks, greeted by the sound of rushing water in the distance. The park guide, a bearded guy in his late 30s, explained we'd be hiking a trail that led to one of the tallest waterfalls in the state. "You'll want to stay on the trail," he warned. "This park is beautiful, but it's also unforgiving. Caves, cliffs, sinkholes, don't wander off." We all nodded, half listening, too busy joking with each other. But those words stuck with me more than I realized. The hike was long, but not too difficult. The trees were in full autumn color, blazing reds, golds, oranges. The trail wound through pines and over streams, the air sharp and clean. By the time we reached the waterfall, I understood why people came here. It was massive. The water thundered down from a cliff face, crashing into a pool below before running off into a foaming river. Mist hung in the air, catching the sunlight in little rainbows. Everyone rushed to take pictures. That's when I noticed something the others didn't seem to. Behind the waterfall, half hidden by the spray, was a dark opening. A cave. I nudged my friend Ethan. "You see that?" He squinted. "Yeah, looks like a cave." Our guide hadn't mentioned anything about it, and the rest of the group was too busy eating their packed lunches or snapping selfies to care. I couldn't stop staring at it. Something about the darkness behind that curtain of water felt wrong, like it wasn't just a cave but an entrance to something else. After lunch, when most of the group was still lounging around, Ethan and I slipped away. We climbed carefully along the rocks at the edge of the pool. The mist soaked our clothes, made everything slippery. My heart pounded, not just from the danger of falling, but from the strange pull I felt toward that opening. When we finally slipped behind the waterfall, the roar of water muffled everything else. The cave was real, tall, narrow, leading straight back into darkness. "Dude, this is sick," Ethan whispered. "Let's just check it out," I said, though my voice shook. We stepped inside. The temperature dropped instantly. The air smelled damp, metallic. The ground sloped downward deeper into the cliff. We used the flashlights on our phones, their weak beams barely cutting through the black. The walls were slick, jagged. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling. Then about 50 feet in, the cave opened into a chamber. That's when we saw them. Carvings. All over the walls, etched deep into the stone, were strange symbols. Circles within circles. Twisted figures with hollow eyes. Lines that seemed to spiral endlessly inward. "Who the hell did this?" Ethan muttered. I reached out, running my fingers along one of the symbols. It felt old. Really old. Not graffiti. Something carved decades, maybe centuries ago. That's when the sound started. At first I thought it was just the waterfall echoing through the rock. But no. This was different. A whisper. Low, almost inaudible, but growing. Ethan spun in a circle, flashlight beam jerking wildly. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, throat tight. The whisper wasn't coming from any one direction. It was all around us, inside us, seeping from the walls, and then for just a second, my light landed on something in the corner of the chamber. A figure, tall, thin, standing motionless. But when I blinked, it was gone. "Let's go," I said, grabbing Ethan's arm. We turned back toward the passage, but the way out seemed longer, twisting, like the cave had changed shape. Panic clawed at me. My breathing grew shallow. The whisper grew louder, words almost forming, though I couldn't understand them. We stumbled forward, slipping on wet rock, scraping our hands and knees. The air felt heavier the deeper we went, as if something was pressing down on us. Finally, after what felt like hours, we burst back out behind the waterfall. Daylight. Mist. The roar of water. Relief flooded through me so hard I almost collapsed. But Ethan didn't look relieved. He stood frozen, staring back into the cave. "What's wrong?" I asked. His face was pale. "You didn't hear it?" "Hear what?" He swallowed hard. "It said my name." We rejoined the group, pretending we'd just been exploring the rocks. No one noticed our soaked clothes or scraped skin. The bus ride home was quiet. Ethan wouldn't talk. He just sat staring out the window, lips moving silently like he was repeating something to himself. That night, he called me. His voice was trembling. "I can still hear it," he whispered. The whisper. It won't stop. I tried to calm him down, told him it was just our imaginations. But as he spoke, the line crackled. And for just a moment beneath his voice, I heard it too. The whisper, saying my name. The next day, Ethan didn't come to school. Or the day after. His parents said he wouldn't leave his room, wouldn't eat, barely slept. He just kept muttering to himself, rocking back and forth. Within a week, he was gone. His family moved. No forwarding address. It was like they erased themselves. I never saw him again. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the world feels still, I hear it. That same whisper. From the walls. Calling my name. When people ask me why I hate field trips, I don't usually tell the real story. I'll just shrug and say I get motion sickness or that I don't like the outdoors. But the truth is, after what happened in the 9th grade, I can't step onto a school bus for a trip without feeling that same creeping dread I felt that day. It started off harmless enough. Our grade was scheduled for a day trip to Green Hollow Reserve, this huge forest about an hour outside town. It wasn't a national park, just some county land people used for hiking and camping. Our teachers wanted it to be educational, but to us it just meant we got out of classes. I sat next to my best friend Lily on the bus. She was the kind of girl who always wore her hair in braids and carried a sketchbook everywhere. She was already sketching out the trees we passed on the way, though the bus was bouncing too much for her lines to be straight. We weren't supposed to stray from the main loop trail. That was rule number 1, hammered into our heads by both teachers and the ranger who met us at the trailhead. He was this wiry guy with a permanent scowl who warned us, "Stay on the marked paths. If you get lost out here, don't expect anyone to find you quickly. Cell service is bad and the woods go on for miles." Most of the kids rolled their eyes. Teachers always made things sound scarier than they were, but I remember the way Lily glanced at me when he said it, like maybe she took him seriously. The hike started off fine. The forest was alive with the hum of insects, the rustle of wind in the leaves, birds calling from above. Sunlight broke through the branches in shifting patches and the air smelled of pine and damp soil. We walked in groups, joking, complaining, snapping pictures on our phones. Teachers led us like sheep along the gravel path. About an hour in, the trail curved near a creek. That's when Lily tugged my sleeve. "Look," she whispered, pointing. At first, I didn't see it. Then my eyes adjusted. Tucked back in the trees, almost swallowed by vines and undergrowth, was a small wooden structure. A cabin. It looked ancient, sagging under the weight of time, its roof half-collapsed, windows shattered. It didn't belong here, not on a maintained trail in a county reserve. "Want to check it out?" Lily asked, her eyes bright. I hesitated. We weren't supposed to leave the trail. But curiosity gnawed at me, and honestly, I didn't want to look like a coward in front of her. So we lagged behind until the rest of the group moved out of sight. Then we slipped off the trail and pushed through the underbrush toward the cabin. Up close, it was even worse. The wood was gray and rotted, covered in moss. The door hung crookedly, creaking every time the wind shifted. Lily sketched furiously, her pencil scratching over paper. "This is amazing," she murmured. I wasn't so sure. Something about the place set my nerves on edge, like the forest itself wanted to hide it away, to swallow it whole. Still, I pushed the door open. The hinges screamed, but it gave way. Inside, dust motes swirled in weak beams of light. The cabin was small, just one room. Broken furniture lay scattered. An iron stove rusted in the corner, but what stood out most were the walls. Every inch of wood was carved. Not with names or graffiti, but with strange markings, spirals, crude faces, tall stick-like figures. I felt my stomach twist. I'd seen carvings like these once before in some late-night rabbit hole about folk rituals. "Creepy," Lily said, though she was still sketching, as if the unease didn't touch her. I was about to suggest we leave when I noticed something darker on the floor. Stains. Old, brown, sticky-looking stains that had soaked into the boards. Blood. Before I could speak, the door slammed shut. We both screamed. Lily dropped her sketchbook. I ran to the door, pulling, shoving. It wouldn't budge. The air inside grew heavy, suffocating. Dust seemed to thicken, choking my lungs. And then came the sound. At first, just a faint scratching, like nails dragging across wood. Then a whisper. Low, incoherent, rising from every corner of the cabin. Lily clutched my arm. Please tell me you hear that. I nodded, heart hammering. The whisper grew louder, shifting into words, repeating, chanting. I couldn't make them out, but I didn't need to. Every instinct in me screamed that we weren't supposed to be here. That's when we saw the figure. In the far corner, half hidden by shadow, something was standing. It was tall, impossibly thin. Its head bent so low it nearly brushed its chest. Its arms hung too long, hands dragging against the floor. We froze. It didn't move. Not at first. Then its head snapped up. There were no eyes, just empty sockets. Lily screamed. The figure lurched forward, its limbs jerking like a puppet. The whispering became deafening, vibrating through my skull. I threw myself at the door, kicking, slamming my shoulder. Finally, the rotten wood gave way and we tumbled out into the daylight. We didn't stop running until we burst back onto the trail, gasping for air. The group was far ahead, the teachers oblivious. We said nothing, not a word, just fell back in line as if nothing happened. But Lily's sketchbook was gone. She must have dropped it when the door slammed. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure's hollow sockets. The next day at school, Lily wasn't herself. She was pale, quiet. Her usual sketches of flowers and landscapes had changed. Now every page was filled with the same thing. Tall, thin figures with empty faces, dozens of them. Weeks passed. She stopped talking to me, stopped talking to anyone, just sat in class scribbling those figures over and over, filling notebooks. One afternoon, she didn't come home. They searched the woods. They searched the trails. No sign of her. The only thing they found was her sketchbook, propped against the door of that same forgotten cabin. Inside, her last drawing was different. It showed two figures, one tall and thin, and one that looked exactly like me. When people think of scary stories, they usually picture haunted houses, shadowy forests, or abandoned hospitals. But for me, the scariest place I've ever been was a school bus. It happened on the way back from a field trip my junior year. We'd gone to a history museum in a nearby city. It was a long day, boring for the most part, though I'll admit the Civil War exhibit was kind of interesting. By the time we all piled onto the bus to head home, the sun was already dipping low. Everyone was tired. The teachers looked relieved that the day had gone smoothly. The bus was filled with that low buzz of conversation and occasional laughter. I took a seat near the back, leaning against the window, my headphones in. Nothing felt out of the ordinary. At least not at first. About half an hour into the ride, I noticed the bus wasn't taking the usual route. I rode this road all the time, both for trips and sports games. But this wasn't it. Instead of the highway, we were rumbling along some narrow two-lane road through the woods. No streetlights. Just endless trees pressing close on either side, branches clawing at the windows as the bus rolled on. I leaned forward to ask one of the teachers, but they were asleep, heads tilted against the seats. Even the driver looked strange. His posture was stiff, both hands locked on the wheel, eyes fixed dead ahead. The other students didn't seem to notice. Some were asleep, others goofing off. But as the minutes ticked by, I grew more uneasy. Where are we? I whispered to my friend Josh across the aisle. He shrugged. Shortcut, maybe? But his voice didn't sound confident. The woods grew darker. The road bumpier. My phone had no signal. Then I noticed something outside the window. Figures. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, there were people out there, standing between the trees, motionless, watching as the bus rolled past. I counted at least a dozen. Men, women, maybe even children. Their clothes looked wrong, old-fashioned, ragged. None of them moved. None of them blinked. I yanked my headphones off. Do you see that? I asked Josh. But when he looked, the figures were gone. I tried to calm down, telling myself I was imagining things. Maybe I was just tired. But then the bus slowed. The engine growled low, the tires crunching over gravel as we pulled into a clearing. That's when I realized there was no road anymore. Just dirt, just trees. The bus stopped in front of a structure, a building. It looked like an old church, its steeple broken, windows shattered. The wood was rotting, the roof sagging. The driver stood up. Without a word, he walked down the aisle, opened the bus door, and stepped outside. None of the teachers stirred. None of the students reacted. They all just sat there, silent, staring ahead with blank expressions, except for me and Josh. "Something's wrong," he whispered. "No kidding. We tried shaking the teachers, but they didn't respond. Their eyes were open but glazed, like they were sleepwalking." One by one, the students stood, in perfect unison. Without speaking, they filed off the bus, following the driver toward the broken church. Josh grabbed my arm. "We're not going out there." But then we heard it. A sound drifting from the church. Singing. Low, droning voices in a language I couldn't understand. The melody crawled under my skin, made my teeth ache. Josh covered his ears, wincing. "What the hell is that?" I peeked through the window. The students and teachers were walking inside. The door closed behind them, and the bus was empty. We didn't know what to do. We couldn't stay there forever, but the idea of stepping outside made every instinct in me scream. "Maybe we should wait," Josh said. "Maybe they'll come back." But they didn't. Minutes dragged into what felt like hours. The singing grew louder, echoing from inside the church. Finally, we couldn't take it anymore. We crept down the aisle and out the bus. The clearing was silent except for that awful chant. The trees loomed close, pressing in. We approached the church slowly. The wood was black with rot, the door half broken. Through the cracks, we saw flickering light, candles and shadows moving across the walls, dozens of them. Josh grabbed my sleeve. "Don't," he hissed, but it was too late. I had to see. I pushed the door just enough to peer inside. The students and teachers were kneeling in rows, heads bowed, candles clutched in their hands. At the front of the church, the bus driver stood behind a broken altar, his arms raised, and behind him, something moved, something enormous crouched in the darkness. Its shape was impossible to pin down, shifting and writhing, sprouting limbs that melted back into its body. Eyes, too many eyes, blinked in and out of existence. The singing swelled. The shadows writhed. The thing turned its gaze toward me, and every candle went out. I don't remember what happened next. The next thing I knew, Josh and I were stumbling along the side of a highway. Headlights blinded us as a car screeched to a stop. A couple inside jumped out, demanding what we were doing out there. We turned around. No woods, no clearing, no church, just asphalt and empty fields. The school never explained what happened. They said the bus had engine trouble and we must have gotten separated from the group somehow. But when I asked about the others, about the driver, the teachers, the students, I got the same rehearsed line. Everyone made it back safely. But I know that's not true, because ever since that night I've seen them, the students, the teachers, standing in the shadows, watching me, waiting. And sometimes when the world is quiet, I still hear that chant, low, endless, calling me back.